is cloning against, you know, against God, and then
And
some
what are
people,
the moral
right.
implications of those clones? I mean, are they a person? Do they have rights?
And that same question comes up to people that were genetically modified as well, um, which is funny because outside of Barrier, everybody in some way is basically genetically modified because they've had all these generational diseases slash you know issues, whatever that comes up, that's passed by generational. Um, they they've gotten rid of them. So having that ability to get rid of them, everybody in essence is, you know, in some way, shape, or form genetically modified. However, Barrier being, you know, all by themselves, were cut off from this, and of course, they were new to this. So they still suffered. Well, they still went through. I mean, it's their customs still is a hard sell for them to use these uterine replicators because again, that's a question of the morals, you know. And is this right? Is this should we be doing this? You know, and so and it's an interesting struggle because for people that are so against any kind of um, deviation from health and the perfect type of man or woman, right? Any of those defects would like lead them to be cast out, and it's an interesting struggle to see that there's an opportunity for them to have a way to not have that problem in the future, and yet they're so boorish and not wanting to mesh with the rest of the world or with the rest of the galaxy that they're fighting it tooth and nail. And so it's like somebody saying, like you're dying of thirst in the desert, and somebody giving you water, but you don't want to drink it out of whatever container they're giving to you. So, at the end of the day, it's an interesting struggle with that, um, which also presents its own unique little story behind it. So one of the things that I really appreciated about this is that although this saga is really about Miles Vorkosigan in Shards of Honor, well, actually no, in Barrier, which is the third book, do you see the development and understanding of who Cordelia and Errol are as individuals, but also who they are as a Lady Vorkosigan and you know Count Vorkosigan. So when you realize that, and you
Well,
basically
Lord
see,
Vorkosigan.
well, Lord, yeah, but I mean, he becomes Count after his father. But at the end of the day, at the end of the day, what you see is it's important. The way that she developed those characters are important because you see how that influences Miles in his decisions later on in life, but also because Errol, the Vorkoskins are such I say they're powerful because they were part of the reason the Cetagandans were basically defeated. So being a highly decorated family and having that honor puts them very high on the list, along with other things that come out later. But they're essentially like top tier in the Vor society. So bringing in a Baton of which is a completely polar opposite mindset, um, having such a powerful husband gives her a mouthpiece that allows her to introduce ideas, concepts, and things that are so foreign to these people because a lot of these people don't leave. They don't go to these other planets. They're, you know,
Isolationist in a way.
yeah, they're Barrier bound. They think of, and it's funny because Barrierians think that they think of it as this is the purest my place, and going out there like bringing stuff back is basically muddying the water, if you will. But everybody else looks at Barians like they're barbarians, and they're literally the
Backward ass
yeah, like
rednecks of the galaxy.
yeah. So like they would be the guys that if somehow we found, we're cut off and found out a bunch of people are still living in castles and fighting with swords. You know what I mean? It's just the fact that the rest of the world sees them as so ass backwards. And we do the same thing. I mean, think about it. If you think about like Vietnam, what do you think of? Think of little thatch huts, right? Jungle and thatch huts. But there are big cities in Vietnam, you know, and it's interesting that because of what we're exposed to visually, that we think that the whole place is like that, you know. And so that's one of the great things about this book is you get about all these books is that you get world views from both sides, which is what a lot of conversations need to have nowadays, you know, for people to see both sides instead of just arguing their side. I mean, it's a life lesson in that way too. So, yeah, I mean, it's it does. It covers so many things, so many different aspects of human existence and existing with others that are different from us.
So
And with that,
what book are you on right now?
oh, I'm done.
So the gut punch I was talking about was at the end of Cryoburn.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, I finished last week, I think.
Yes, but this is what, your fourth time doing it?
Yeah, and I'll do it again every year, pretty much. I reread or re-listen to the entire series. It's in my constant revisit, along with uh, Old Man's War, and it's probably the longest series that I revisit. But Old Man's War, the Threshold series, Hyperion.
Oh, yeah. Hyperion's another one.
Um,
That's another overlooked series,
so
sadly.
and I guess I should say that Grover Gardner, who does the narration for the audiobooks, is phenomenal. Um,
I agree.
I don't think that I would have enjoyed these books anywhere near as much if I had just read them as opposed to listen to them. Um, and with this being our first video upload, I guess I should say that I have a very uh, large um, listening capacity. I like to multitask, and so I will probably consume. I'm probably down to 2 audiobooks a week now, depending on what I'm doing. If I have a lot of free time and I'm working on projects in my basement, then I can easily consume 4 audiobooks a week, which is not great for my wallet, but it is great for my mind. And I tend to like series. I like books that tell a story over a very long period of time. I'm not crazy about, there are several book series out there where each book is completely independent of the other books, and there's very little relation, if any, between them and the characters and stuff. And with this series, you get the story of Miles Vorkosigan as he grows up and as he becomes who he becomes, and all of the people that he interacts with, and how it impacts him and how he impacts them. And I just, it's a fantastic series. It's definitely in my top 5 of book series of all time. And I don't know where Lois could go with this series if she were to continue it. I don't think she has plans to continue it. I think Gentleman Joe and the Red Queen was uh, pretty much the end of the series, and it was a good end. It wasn't season 8 of Game of Thrones or anything like that. So, but this is one of those series that I wish I could remove it from my brain so that I could listen to it all over again and have it be brand new and have all of the things that happen be new.
I
And
agree. I
uh,
agree.
the other series that I would say that I feel that way about would be Old Man's War. But there are, when you have as many audio books as you and I have, it's really hard to say that one series stands out amongst all of these other series because you, like me, most of the time we will read book 1 and book 2 of a series, and if it didn't gel with us, we put it down. Usually, we're not going to continue that train wreck.
Yeah, absolutely.
and
And
be
there
like,
there have been plenty of them. There have been plenty of them. And then there's other books. Carry on that. There's other book series that we have gone and we were stayed true to them. And a good example is going to be is what's his name? Undying Mercenary.
yeah, B.V. Larson.
Okay, so the series. So then a caveat to that would be the there are series that we've followed for quite a few books. I got up to 13 of the books, and B.V. Larson's Undying Mercenary. There comes a time, and this kind of happened as well with Expeditionary Force,
Yep,
um, but you start to get a, it's like a sitcom.
yep.
Just like every
There's a
sitcom has the
formula.
same recipe.
Yes,
Yeah,
there's a
recipe
formula for
formula.
each book, and it gets repetitive.
And so like you can deal with it for a while because the story is interesting enough or good enough to hold its own, even though it's following a recipe. However, at the end, when it's become so constant that it's that no nothing there's no way that it could be interesting enough for you to see past that because you already know how this is going to end.
Yep.
And so for that, I mean, it takes the joy out of the book
Yeah, I
for
think
sure.
I think I think the first 5 or 6 of the Undying Mercenary books,
Are fabulous.
yeah, and we were. I mean, I was emailing BV Larson.
I got
Uh,
him to sign our books.
and no, that was Scalzi, dude.
Oh yeah, Scalzi, you're right, correct.
But I was emailing Larson and 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 asking him when this was going to be made into a TV series or something because it was so good. The concept was so cool, and and he's like, he would get back to me and say, there's been talks, but nothing's in stone, blah blah blah, and he's done a ton of other series as well.
Hmm.
Um,
He's a great author.
the Mech series was phenomenal, and you want to talk visceral. I mean, that was gut
Yes.
wrenching, visceral, but at the same time, the books were completely independent of each other in that series. And when you hear
Well,
a title like Mech, you would not think that
yeah,
it
you're not
is what
thinking
it
heck
is because
what it is,
they're
right?
and 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 it was complete. I mean, that was part of the shock, I guess. I was expecting it to be, giant robots or something,
Right.
and
You're
nothing like that.
you're thinking
And
Gundam
then
all the way.
children getting ripped in half by aliens and stuff was, you know, I was like, holy cow, I
I mean,
mean,
the first book, it literally throws you into a
yeah,
bloodbath. It's literally like watching. It's like how they enter the first scenes of uh, Saving Private Ryan.
Yeah.
Like you don't get any kind of like
Yep.
ease into it. It's
Yep.
like literally there.
You're tossed into the deep end. You either sink or swim.
Right.
And it was, in a lot of ways, I mean, there's probably a lot of people out there that read books, even science fiction books, and have never even heard of B.V. Larson. And, he's somebody that definitely deserves, your attention. It's kind of like, what's the guy who writes the John Ryan series?
Oh, John Ryan. That's yeah, because I got all his. What is that? That is
I'm gonna have to go to my library.
I got you. Hold on. It is Craig Robertson.
Yes, and that is another series that eventually started getting kind of repetitive. But the
But I will
first,
say before you go too far on that one, I would say at least there were typically they would come in groups of three.
yeah,
So at
yeah, we
least you
were buying the
had
publishers packs and
right.
stuff,
So at least you
and
had a yes, it's the same idea slash story um, circumstances. However, each little group of books had its own little part of the world that it took place in, and sometimes even in non worlds, you know, going into to hell basically. I mean, there are many things that does, and time. It can get very confusing if you don't read them in the right order. If you don't read them, you will because so many times they go back in time and cross references. So you have to stick to the series to understand it. Um, so even there's a couple of books that I didn't really care for, but I had to get through them because there was another series I was ready to read.
yeah,
And so
and that's
phenomenal
definitely
writing.
a series that covers a massive swath of time.
Oh yes,
Um, just holy cow! But he did such a great job of writing the series, um, and I think like Vorkosigan is an example of where not one of these books is repetitive.
right. It's like Game of Thrones. George R. R. Martin does that very. He's got a very good way of. So I guess in ways you could take the Ice and Fire. You can take that series and you can basically take both Vorkosigan and Sun Eater and compare them and put them in the same because Sun Eater basically takes the so overly descriptive sometimes, like to the nth degree description on a world where the environment and you feel like you're there. The description of physical feeling as well as feeling mental anguish and suffering
To
and
its
joy.
detriment at times, though, too. I mean, if I had a complaint about Sun Eater, it would be that something that should take one chapter to fucking explain and execute takes 4 or 5 chapters to happen.
Right, right. Which
And,
is
and
I'd say he's probably a happy medium between the George R. R. Martins, out there and palatable, because as much as I love the Ice and Fire series, by the time you finish one chapter, you've you've been introduced to 100 people, and none of them are important. So that being said, but go back to BV Larson, um, and even Craig Allenson and these other guys, they're they have a great story to tell. But I think the problem, or it's not the problem, we are two people that once we've developed or once we've taken in something, um, how it works, or we want to move on to something new,
Yep.
to discover something new, which is why we do projects that we do. It's why we try to learn new stuff all the time. And I mean, hell, that's one of the main reasons that brought us together as friends to begin with. And so I think that the problem with BV Larson, like specifically Undying Mercenary, is that you get into a scenario just like people. So like I would attribute people that like Undying Mercenary and stick with it, and it's like their favorite series, are people that watched from beginning to end The Walking Dead, simply because the scenario is still there. It's always going to be the same, and yes, season to season is slightly different. The environment's different, but the story's still the same, and the outcome. And yeah, you might get a surprise here and there, but for the most part, it's the same thing, which is why I didn't finish the series, because I just got to the point where I couldn't watch any more of it, because it wasn't entertaining or it wasn't exciting. And same thing with that, going back to the other side, is I would basically, I'll say, yep, thanks, babe. Oh, super. Thank you so much. Oh, yeah, I'll save some tomorrow if I have to. Thank you, babe. Uh, so, like I said, the problem with Undying Mercenary is that it, because it's a continuous repetitive cycle like Walking Dead, that if you crave something new and different, then it's not going to keep you entertained. It's not going to keep you wanting more. And so I think what ends up happening is, what like I experienced was the same thing. I couldn't get past Terminus in Walking Dead, and just like this, I couldn't get past. I believe it was what, Steel World, or no, it was later than that. But again, this is even an example, because every book is named for the new environment, world, you know, and it's like there's. But this is good for some people, because there are people that just like to be able to listen or read or watch TV or movies where they can literally just shut off their thinking part and just be entertained.
Yeah, I think, like, I can appreciate, reintroducing characters that were killed in the previous book and stuff in that world, right? Where,
Right. Because
people
it makes
can,
sense.
you know, um, but reintroducing the
Claver. That's all you have
same
to
damn,
say.
oh my God, it's
Yeah.
just, and then you can throw a twist in there where Claver comes back as a female, or he clones a female, which, happened. But
Well,
at the same time,
who did that first, though? Doctor Who.
yeah.
The Master
So,
came back.
yeah. So I think Lois McMaster Bujold was able to write 17 books and two novellas without being repetitive,
Yeah.
without losing
Here.
me as a listener in the
I think so.
process. I
Think
mean,
this.
she did
We're recording, babe.
uh, the I mean, by the time you get to Ethan of Athos, 10 minutes into that book, and I was like, I do not want to listen to this story.
Which
By the
is,
time I finished that book, I was like, you know what? That was a great fucking book. It
and you know
really
what?
was. And
I
I
would
gave
not
a
have,
shit. I gave a shit about the characters.
and I wouldn't have listened to it had you not given me the heads up of. You didn't tell me anything about it. You said it's going to be it's going to be a different kind of read for you. It has nothing to do with Miles, or it's yes, it's in the same area, same universe, same planets. However, it's a side story, but it also introduces you to a grander, more larger vision of how the world is here or how the universe is here. And so I thought it was a great story.
Yep. Yep.
Do I think that it's necessary to read as part of the series? No. But do I think you do a disservice to yourself by skipping it and not reading it? Absolutely. It's a great story. And there's going to be people like myself and like yourself that our backgrounds tend to lean very masculine. And so there are certain situations and conversations and scenarios that we don't normally venture into.
Right. We wouldn't choose to buy that book.
No, 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 no. And not to mention the fact, even if you had started that book, or if I started that book and I was invested in this series, um, and like Miles, I came from a very strict family, very religious family, and until I left and went to and approached the world on my own, and started to make decisions of my own, excuse me, um, I would not have the mindset that I do now, and I would not have met some of the amazing people that I have. And so I think that when you leave your own, you know, preconceptions behind and you just take something as it is and then see it the value that it gives without your prejudice, um, I think it absolutely is a great story. And so yeah, I find that a lot with, and like I said, had I not given this another chance, because again, what stopped me 20 years ago from reading this series was my preconception that it was all a lame space opera slash love story. And I was like, I have no interest in reading that. None whatsoever. I wanted shoot 'em up, kill 'em, violent books, and you know, that's what I got. And then you send this to me, and I'm like, you're out of your mind. I mean, I would say the slowest book or slowest series that I had listened to in that 3 year period that you were well, no, it's probably 2 year period that you were listening to Vorkosigan, because a lot of the books were still coming out, the newer ones. Um, and you re-listen to it every time the new one came out. You re-listen to them during that period. I think the slowest, um, least amount of action, least amount of say violence would be the Hyperion series. And the Hyperion series, you have to really approach it from a completely different point of view of any kind of science fiction book, um, simply because it is it's a journey through human nature.
Well, I think there's a great uh, course on the history of science fiction authors, and of course, they go all the way back, and you talk about all of the incredible authors, even starting with the pulp magazines and guys writing, these short stories and stuff, and how, which is how we get.